One of the beautiful invitations that we have with meditation is experiencing, wait a minute, oh, I'm in the thoughts, but look, I can notice the thoughts. So if I notice that I'm thinking, then there's an awareness there that is not my thoughts. And we do the same thing with the body. Just feel how you feel yourself in your body. But then notice, wait a minute, I'm noticing that I have a body. I'm noticing what my seat feels like beneath me. I'm noticing what the air feels like against my skin. I'm noticing my heartbeat. I'm noticing my breath filling my body and then leaving my body. So if I'm noticing those things, there's a part of me that is aware of it. Who's that? That's not my body. It's the vehicle for that awareness, but that awareness is really who we are. That awareness is who we were before this body came into existence, and that's who we will continue to be when the body dies.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Shifting Dimensions podcast, where we explore the unseen, the unknown, and the transformative moments that shift our understanding of reality. I'm your host, Jumi Moses, spiritual seeker and metaphysical investigator, exploring the mysteries of existence. On the show today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Kara Goodwin. Kara's mission is to help you reconnect with your spiritual nature so you can live with more clarity, purpose, peace, and fulfillment. She is the host of the Soul Elevation podcast, which is ranked in the top 2% of all podcasts globally across all genres. She's also the author of Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living. Kara, thank you so much for joining me today here on Shifting Dimensions. It's such a pleasure to speak with you.
I'm so excited, Jimmy. I'm so happy to be here. I love your style. I've been listening to your podcast and you are a really exceptional host. So it's really a pleasure and an honor to join you today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. And before we got started, I was just telling you as well that I had the pleasure of listening to your book and I really enjoyed it. It was I feel like your energy was permeating through the recording. You just have a very grounded energy, which I really appreciated. So I can't wait to dive in and hear more about your story and how you help people on their spiritual path. So I want to start off by asking you again about your story. And I know that you mentioned in the book that, you had a very materialist mindset and perspective in how you went through life. And then a series of events happened that kind of broke you open and led you down a spiritual awakening. Could you please talk about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for those kind words. I'm so happy that the book resonated with you, and I really appreciate that. Yes. So, as you say, I just had this mainstream, didn't really question anything. I'd had a curiosity my whole life. Looking back, I can see that I was drawn to like mysterious stories. I was always like the Bermuda Triangle and UFOs. And I was a child in the 80s and early 90s. And those types of, I think you're probably too young to remember this, but there were these Time Life series of books and they'd have these commercials for them and it'd be like, learn about the Bermuda Triangle, learn about UFOs, what's up with the pyramids. And I was always like, I want to know about all this stuff, and never got the series of books. But it was just those types of things I was drawn to. I wasn't particularly religious. We went to church a little bit. I had that foundation a little bit, but I was very drawn to paranormal things. And then as I got older, I feel like I felt that I was growing out of that, but I think I was turning that off where I was accepting that my five senses were really the key to what reality was, and to kind of let go of those other things that interested me more when I was a child. And so I was really, I had a corporate job, went to a big university. I worked for great big companies in IT and then in sales. And I had have two children and a husband. And so I was just really very busy and just on the hamster wheel, not questioning very much. And what, like you said, my life came crashing down very suddenly. And that was the awakening for me. So the way that looked in my life was that just within, so I have my little nuclear family with my husband and my kids, and then my husband's family and my family. There was death, there were tragic accidents, there was a heart transplant, our dog died, and all of these things, there were major surgeries with both sides of our parents, siblings, so very close in our sphere. One of our close friends who had been in our wedding, so not a family member, but a close friend of my husband's, had a brain tumor. He passed away the next year, but all of that happened in 7 months. And so it really was like the rug got pulled out from under me. And what had been a secure life where I could just feel like I was secure and I was enjoying life and I didn't really have to go deeply in life, that disappeared. And through that, I just felt this uncertainty and I felt like I needed something. And I was living in Italy, we were living in Italy at the time, and talk therapy didn't really resonate with what I needed at that time for the practicalities of language. And I didn't have a car. I literally had a pedestrian lifestyle. There were all these complications of trying to find the resource and making sure that I could be understood, and that all these practical things where I was like, maybe, but that doesn't quite feel like it's the right solution right now under these circumstances. I think I did go to a talk therapist once, but it was a whole thing to get there and to find the resource and all of this. So I'd always felt intrigued by meditation. And so when my life came crashing down around me, I had a conversation in my head with a God that I wasn't sure who, if he even knew who I was. It's funny when you look back and it's in a question like, where was I at that time? Was I agnostic? Was I atheist? I don't think I ever completely dipped into atheism, but I do believe that I thought that there was a God, but that I was just a background player and didn't have access, hadn't been doing the work to be noticed and to be cared about in, or be worthy of that. Really, it comes down to worthiness from, again, looking back and being honest with how I felt about it. So I, through a theoretical, metaphorical Hail Mary, because I didn't grow up Catholic, but let's just talk about it in sporting terms, Hail Mary, where it was like, hey, I'm out of options here and I just don't know what to expect next. And I feel I've always been drawn to meditation, but I don't know how to find somebody to help me, where, again, living abroad, and I would want it in English. I did speak Italian, but just I'd taken enough yoga classes there where I would get a little bit lost, and you're trying to relax, you're trying to focus on your breath, but you're also like, is everybody out of this position and waiting for me to come out of this position? Because I've been having my eyes closed, like they said, and I missed what they were, I misunderstood what they were saying. So I wanted to learn it. I had tried it enough times on my own that I knew that I didn't really get anywhere. If I just tried to sit there and not think, that didn't do anything for me. So I had this conversation in my head. If you even know who I am, if you even exist, I think that meditation could be the right thing for me. If that's true, help me, guide me, show me what's the next best step for me. And how can I make the most out of this time of life that I'm in? And then looking back, it's interesting because I just did that and went on with my life step by step, day by day. And it's in looking back that I see how quickly things started to come in. And I had a friend who recommended a documentary that ended up leading me to the first spiritual teacher that I had, who was very in, their whole thing was meditation and the science of meditation. And I was like, I want to learn their methods, because it was, even though this was a yogic master, it was Paramahansa Yogananda, who's the author of Autobiography of a Yogi. He passed away in 1952, but lineages were still carrying on his teachings. And so I went into his work, found people who were teaching his methods, and then it was off to the races from there. But it really began as a secular way, even though I was learning from this spiritual group. For me, it was, I'm not sure about all that. I just want to know how to do this. What are the steps to get into meditation so that I can get through this period that I'm in, find some stability? And over time, I began to have some of my own spiritual experiences that were very personal to me that then helped those barriers that I had put up, those protective barriers. I'm not sure about the prayer thing, and I don't know if I want to go there. And then started having those feeling light, seeing light within myself, and seeing visuals that where my inner sight was opening up, and it started to help me to want to connect to something deeper within me. And so that's my origin story of where I am now.
Again, it's always fascinating to hear what was that pivotal point in someone's story or trajectory on life that completely forces them to do a 180 and a lot of times turn inward and unearth not just ways to cope with what they're going through, but there's this like spiritual awakening and understanding that the world and the reality that we're currently living in is so much bigger than what we can imagine, and especially experiencing so many, not say so many, a few deaths in the family. I know that death is one of the major catalysts for people to be more open and receptive to non-materialist ways of thinking because of that grieving that they're feeling after losing their loved ones. And it's, where did they go? And that's not necessarily what you were contemplating. I think you just wanted a way to get through such a difficult period that you were experiencing. So thank you for sharing that. How did you? I want to dig a little bit deeper because I want to talk about how you meditating and seeking out these other spiritual modalities to help you through such a difficult time. How did that eventually become your vocation in terms of helping other people on their spiritual path? And I do want to talk about some of your mystical experiences as well, but I do want to touch on that first.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you share with the death part, because I think I heard you saying in one of your episodes that's been the entryway for you,
Yes.
where you've always been curious about and afraid of death. And that's been one of the drivers behind it. And it's interesting that you say that because I wouldn't have consciously said that I was trying to connect with my deceased sister-in-law, for example, or but I do feel that maybe there was something underneath what I was allowing myself to feel that was I wasn't acknowledging, because she was only 5 years older than me and it was very sudden. She took her life, and I was very close with her, and because it was a suicide, it was, I think that added another layer of it where there are just complicated feelings with that. There's, I think anytime anybody that you're close with dies, you wonder if there's something you could have done under any circumstance. I think when there's a suicide, everybody feels like they could have done more. But I think that there probably was something to that, and I wasn't zeroing in on that. In terms of the wanting to help other people with this, what happened with my work with other people really was the group that I was learning to meditate with, or that I learned to meditate with. I became part of their community for a little while, and they were doing a meditation teacher training. And I was like, ooh, I'd to be able to do that. And I was preparing to transition back to the US. And when we had moved to Italy, I had let go of my corporate job. And I had been, like I said, I'd been in IT, I'd been in sales, and I wasn't eager to get back to that when we moved back. And so it was like that door opened, and I thought, I've gotten so much from meditation. So maybe this is a pathway for me. Maybe I can help other people through this with meditation. And when I began, I really was just focused on meditation, and that what I wanted people to learn, whether they wanted to connect with their spirit, whether they just like the way that I'd gotten into it, if they just wanted to feel better and have a natural method to calm their nervous system or whatever it might be. It was a process over time where I started to open myself up more to the spiritual element because I began, even though I was teaching, when we moved back, I was teaching in yoga studios, which those yoga studios can have kind of a spiritual bent to them, but it's still, they're public places. You want to be careful with how you convey things and not throw things down people's throats unnecessarily or unwelcomingly. So it's been a little bit over time of me getting more and more comfortable and even recognizing what's happening in the meditations, because the meditations themselves, I don't identify as a channeler, for example, but I can definitely feel energies shifting and presences that come in. And when it feels like, okay, I this is an unexpected place for the meditation to go, where I just get an idea that comes in the moment, and it's, oh, I love this. Let's follow this and let's see where this goes. I'm still in the driver's seat, but there is something bigger happening. And so it's really, for me, it's less about trying to identify what that is, trying to name it, trying to glorify it, or let's have this big transmission. Let's change it from we're going to meditate to we're going to have a transmission, and I'm going to channel, and it's going to be, you're going to do this and all of this. It's still trying to keep it just things that we can all get our arms around, and let's just see what happens, and keeping that intention starting every meditation with picture yourself in a sphere of light. You are in a high vibrational sphere of light, and that is a filtration system. Only the very highest is going to be able to come in. Bring in your higher self, welcome in your divine guides. Let's keep this sovereign and of the highest good. And so that's always really important for me, just with, okay, let's let what it wants to happen with these parameters, that we're all protected, that we're here for the highest good. So that has just developed over time. Sometimes there are things that go unsaid in the meditations that we all can feel into and share afterwards, where we're seeing similar things or we're experiencing similar colors or however it shows up. So that can be really fun, a fun element of it. And then as I was going through my own exploration, things like energy healing started to pique my interest. And so I learned Reiki. I went through the Reiki training to become a Reiki master. That was my foundation for energy healing. And as I had my own practice of it, there's always that Reiki element that continues to remain in there, but there's also the intuitive guidance of, okay, I call it energy healing rather than strictly Reiki, so that I can feel like I can move and have more room in what my sessions are like, and how, so I don't feel like I have to stick to a prescribed formula. And yeah, I
Yeah.
think, does that,
Yeah, that answers my question. Yeah, because
okay.
I wanted to know just how you were able to have your spiritual awakening and how you got so passionate about it that how you decided to use that or what you've learned in regards to meditation specifically to help people on their own path. And I always admire people who have mastered meditation because I've had countless conversations and meditation is one of the first things that people are introduced to when they're looking for some sort of spiritual grounding and understanding. And I struggle with it. I think my brain is too active. And I want to talk about that with you a little bit. You touch on this in the book as well about how to quiet the mind. And part of one of your prescriptions was going on a digital detox, and maybe I should do that. But for people who struggle to quiet their mind or meditate, are there different forms of meditation outside of just sitting in a quiet room with your eyes closed?
Yes. That was one of my problems too. That's why I was sharing in the beginning with my journey, where I was doing that shout out to help me, and is meditation the right thing? And part of that was I need a teacher. I need somebody to help me because I had tried it and I didn't think I could do it, but I still felt really drawn to it. And my problem had been that I was just trying to sit there. I would follow like even things that I would find on YouTube. One thing was that I wanted to go whole hog right away. So I was finding like 30-minute meditations and trying to sit there. And I wasn't confident with what I even was trying to do. How do I sit? What do I do with myself? Should I lay down? What if I fall asleep? And all of these questions. So when I was just going straight into a guided meditation, I felt like there were a lot of pieces that I didn't have. But one thing that I make sure that I do every time I meditate is start with breath work. And I do different kinds of breath work, but our breath work is closely tied with our nervous system and with our mind. So we can, for example, we can have a longer exhale. We can deepen our breathing, making sure that it goes down lower into the belly. Even I like to say, breathe into your hips. Let it feel like your hips are getting the breath. So it's going so far down. And having a nice long inhale, but then making sure that the exhale is longer. So if you do a 4 count inhale, do a 6 count exhale, or an 8 count exhale, or it doesn't, you don't have to follow a specific formula, but if you make sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale it can be helpful in that situation to breathe through the nose. So breathe in for 4 or whatever, out for 8. That there is a physiological response that happens with based on the inhale. The inhale is activating. A higher chest breath is more activating, so that's why you want to go low. If you're getting past the diaphragm, your nervous system just relaxes. If you're breathing down into your belly, you're telling your nervous system everything's okay, because if you were in danger, you would naturally breathe in your chest, and that would send the energy to your limbs and your senses, because you'd have to be making very quick actions if you really were in danger. But the thing is, we go through life in a stress state. We are telling our body we're in danger when we really aren't, but we're in that state a lot. The body just naturally knows, oh, if I'm breathing down into my belly, there's no danger. So I'm going to send those chemicals that say, okay, we can rest, we can restore, we can rejuvenate, and we don't have to be in that fight or flight. So the breath can be one way. If you start every meditation with the breath, if you start with the intention that I'm going to rejuvenate, I'm going to I'm going to do some restoration, I'm going to quiet my mind. So those things can be very helpful. But also going back to how I would want, oh, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. Where's the 30-minute meditation? That's what I'm doing. And that can set us up also for feeling like we're not doing it right. So short times and building up can really help, because the thing with meditation is you're not trying to shut your mind off. You're trying to get control over your attention so that you have better aptitude for noticing when you're getting caught up in your thoughts, and then bringing it back. Where am I in this moment? What was I focusing on? Oh, I was focusing on the breath. Let me get back to the breath. Getting that discipline to say, it's not that I'm stopping my thoughts, it's that I'm increasing my ability to notice, and I'm taking control, and I'm saying, okay, I'm coming back. It's okay. It's okay that I got caught up. And it's weird how we get right in the middle of a thought. We can be right in the middle of why am I thinking about that second grade classroom and that fish tank that we had in my second grade class? Where in the world did this come from? It's all right. Just that happens. These things float up. Just come back to where you are, but aim in the beginning. Maybe do it for 1 minute. where we're focusing on the breath. We're just watching the breath. And every time we go down the thought train, we recognize that we come back, and we only are doing that for 1 minute. And we can do that. And then maybe later that day or tomorrow, we do another minute, or we go up to 90 seconds. And it's just that building, because it's like a muscle. And so it can feel 30 minutes. It's unbelievable how long 30 minutes can feel when we aren't ready for it and we're trying to not think. It can become very frustrating very fast. So 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to start with, get comfortable with that and just let it be something that you're in it really for the long term, like really having a vision of, okay, I want to build this practice up. I want to make it sustainable. I want to be comfortable with it and not feeling if you're going to be meditating, it's got to be for this length of time or longer, or it's not worth it.
I love everything that you just said, especially in regards to time and meditation not being about shutting your mind off. And I want to start off with time because I feel like I go into it like it needs to be at least 10, 15, 20 minutes for me to really feel like I'm meditating. But I love that you said you can even start off with just a minute of observing the thoughts that are coming up and bringing back your attention to your breath. And I love that because it makes it less daunting. And I think that's why I haven't tried as much as I should to get into meditation. I feel like sometimes I do meditate in the sense of when I'm doing the dishes, I might decide not to listen to music or listen to a podcast. But again, I'm still like doing something. I want to get to the point where I don't have to do anything. It's like I still need some sort of like stimulation or something. But I want to touch on the meditation not really being about shutting your mind off, but observing your thoughts. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's important for people to understand, people like me who have all these thoughts that keep firing off in their head. Because I always thought like meditation was about emptying the mind. And I think it still is, but it sounds like it's not about judging or giving up when thoughts are coming up. And I'm sure thoughts are going to come up a lot when you first start trying to meditate.
Yes, exactly. That's so beautifully said. Getting into a meditative state, there is that freedom from thought where you're just in the flow and you're just present. And what's really funny is the number of times that I get into that state and then I'm like, oh, this is it. and then I'm and then I'm judging, or I not in a negative way, but it's like, oh yes, I'm there. This is awesome. But then immediately the thoughts are coming in and I'm labeling and I'm using the language, and it's a joke. It's just, God, can I just be in it without getting words wrapped up in it and trying to explain it? I think that's one of the things too, is of being a meditation teacher, is that often I'll have experiences and then I want to help other people get to that experience. So then I'm like explaining it to myself, like, okay, how did we get here? What were the steps? What did I go through? How can I use language to convey, trying to guide people to this? So it's no, just be here, just stop that. But but part of having and cultivating a meditation practice is getting that discipline of, okay, yep, here are the thoughts, and just recognizing how this happens. Because so often we go through life and we're just ping-ponging around incomplete thought to incomplete thought. We're cycling through the number of thoughts that we repetitively have, that we just, it's like we feel like we're forgetting something. Wait, what am I forgetting? Oh, yeah, it's that thought that I think all day long, that I just cycle through this, whether it's a conversation that's bothering us or a conversation that's coming up or something we regret or something that we want to make sure we don't forget. Whatever it is, we've got these things that just cycle through. And it's easy for us to think that we are the thoughts. It's just, oh, that's who I am. So there's no separation from it. One of the beautiful invitations that we have with meditation is experiencing, wait a minute, oh, I'm in the thoughts, but look, I can notice the thoughts. So if I notice that I'm thinking, then there's an awareness there that is not my thoughts. And we do the same thing with the body. This is a beautiful meditation practice or part of a meditation that you can incorporate, which is let me feel, just feel how you feel yourself in your body. But then notice, wait a minute, I'm noticing that I have a body. I'm noticing what my seat feels like beneath me. I'm noticing what the air feels like against my skin. I'm noticing my heartbeat. I'm noticing my breath filling my body and then leaving my body. So if I'm noticing those things, there's a part of me that is aware of it. Who's that? That's not my body. Now, the body has a consciousness, the body has an intelligence, the body is a being, and it can be a great friend to that awareness. It can serve, it's the vehicle for that awareness, but that awareness is really who we are. And that's the opportunity that we have with meditation, because, like you're saying with washing the dishes, we can shift our mindset or we can shift our awareness. We can get into a flow state as we're doing, and we can have glimpses of, we can have epiphanies while we're washing the dishes. We can have inspiration while we're washing the dishes. We can shift into a different brainwave state. But it really is the most conducive way to connect with that awareness that is us. It's the eternal aspect of who we are, beyond the body, beyond the thoughts, beyond the emotions, beyond the memories. But that awareness is who we are eternally. That awareness is who we were before this body came into existence. And that's who we will continue to be when the body dies. And so we have this opportunity with meditation, and it's really in that stillness where it's just easier to perceive. So it's not that if we don't feel that we can sit there and we feel like if we want to get into to get into what we would consider a meditative state, we need to be active. We need to be walking. We need to be washing the dishes. It's not that's wrong. You can get into a flow state while you're swimming. You could be drawing and start to tap into something else, something more eternal within you, but it can be very subtle. These states, this awareness that we are, it whispers, it doesn't shout. It can start shouting at us. I feel like that's what happened with my life falling apart so quickly, with all of those things compiling all at once. I feel like that was a bigger part of me that was shaking me awake. Like, it is time and you're not listening. So we got to deconstruct this whole thing. It's all coming down. And now, now you can find yourself, because we're getting rid of all the things you're using to distract yourself. But that the whispers, the opportunity that we have to connect with our soul at any given moment, it is quiet, it is subtle. And so we have to be quiet. We have to get into that stillness. Again, and I don't want to say we have to, because nothing is, there are artists out there who are like, I, if you give me a paintbrush, I will get into the zone and I can hear my soul. There are musicians who it's like, oh, once I'm in this flow, I can feel my soul, I can hear my soul. And that's valid. So it's not taking anything away from that. But for a great place to start is slowing down, getting into stillness, because because it is so subtle that you can tune into it more sensitively when everything else is stopped as much as we can make it.
I love everything that you just said, especially the part about that awareness that's always with us, which is who's the observer. And I've always been conscious of that awareness, not consistently. I think my first introduction or awareness of that observer or the awareness behind our thoughts was when I was actually 1 years old, where because that awareness doesn't age. And
Mhm.
that was not my 1 year old mind observing my surroundings. I know it wasn't. But I love what you said about the fact that with meditation, it helps us get into a flow state to hear our soul, to connect with our soul. And that was something I wrote down that I really wanted to touch on And I'm caught between going down that line of conversation because I also want to ask a general question, which is like, what are the benefits of meditation? So I'm going to ask both. So I want to quickly touch on overall, what are the benefits of meditation, which you've been alluding to? And I also want to talk about the fact that why is it important for us to get into a flow state in order to hear our soul?
Okay. The benefits of meditation, they're multi-layered. One of the early benefits that I started to experience was that calmness that I was seeking. It was more of a security that I started to build back up, some less fear, really able to come more out of the fear that had built up with everything that was going on. But a surprising side effect was my physical health got a lot better with a dedicated daily practice. And when I say dedicated, it was still just like 15 minutes. I think I built up to 15 minutes. So it wasn't like hours and hours. I think I was doing it twice a day, maybe. But I used to get sick. I used to get sinus infections constantly. I would get a cough and it would take me weeks to get through it, and to where I would have to sleep in a different room because I didn't want to wake my husband up. And once I would start coughing, I just couldn't stop. And this would happen, it would always happen in the fall and the winter, but it was starting to happen in the summertime as well, where it was just like, oh no, here it is, and it's going to be here forever. And it was just a thing that I thought I was really susceptible to. And I really don't get sick anymore. And that happened pretty quickly. Now, every once in a while, I will start to get a cold. You can hear it I'll get congested, but it doesn't develop into, first of all, it doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. But it also doesn't develop into a full blown thing that I can't get rid of. It might last a week. And again, it's more of like just a congestion. I can hear it. I might have a runny nose a little bit, but it's nothing like what I used to struggle with. And so that was a surprising thing. And I think that goes into the effect of energy and how we are energy and our bodies are energy. And so the more that we are bringing energy into our practice, which is one of the things that happens through meditation, connecting with that awareness draws more life force into our body. And then our body starts to utilize that. And we clear up gaps, energetic tears, etheric tears, any kind of misalignments. We just start to get into this energetic alignments. And one of the benefits of that is physical health or improved physical health. Memory recall is a big one too. The brain is a big part of a meditation practice. The heart is a big part of the meditation practice. But the memory, I'm really impressed when you say something like, I remember when I was 1 year old and I beautiful memory. Like, how many people can remember memories from when they were one? But when you do develop a meditation practice, that's one of the things where that's one of the byproducts is your memory improves. And so that can mean you have access to older memories that you didn't used to have, dream recall, or it can also mean that your short-term memory improves as well. But dream recall is another thing that has improved as well. I used to question if I actually dreamt regularly because I couldn't ever remember. Now I have very vivid dreams and a lot of symbolism in my dreams. I feel like I sometimes have prophetic or profound dreams where I'm like, whoa, I don't know if that was just a dream. Felt like more than that. And then improved relationships. That's a big one too. And really, the improved relationships is a byproduct, can be a byproduct of that relationship that we're building within ourselves and the connection that we're building within ourselves. We get stronger within ourselves. The more we're connected to that awareness, if we're doing that in a healthy way, it is possible that people can tip more into narcissism the more they focus on themselves. But if you're doing it in a healthy way, in an authentic way, where you're trying to work through your own shadows, which means acknowledging and accepting the shadows, the parts of yourself that you need to work on, that, you have an invitation to work on, but accepting that you're a work in progress too, and that there are ways that we show up in the world that, okay, I need to learn from that. That wasn't my best effort. But I believe that cultivating that self love, that self acceptance, that self compassion, that's where it all begins. That then it ripples out. We have more compassion, less judgment, more love for the people that we're connected to, which strengthens the relationship. People don't feel so defensive around us because they're not getting that judgment from us. And we feel so much of it is feeling more secure in ourselves so that we aren't so threatened by what other people are doing. We can let people do what they want to do and we don't take offense to it as easily. And so there are so many benefits. And like I say, there's so many layers to it because do we want to talk about it at the physical level? Do we want to talk about it at the emotional level, at the brain level, at the relationship level, the spiritual level? I feel like we've already talked about it. But for me, that's the biggest benefit. The I feel like the core of humanity's problems is, especially in Western cultures, is that we're cut off from our spirit. We don't acknowledge the spiritual nature to us. We're looking at everything from the physical, and we're starting to, I feel like we're dipping into acknowledging the role of the emotions more and how the emotions play into our physical experience. And there's more focus on that and more work on that. But we still, by and large, are not acknowledging the spiritual nature of existence, which means that we don't look at things and we're not encouraged to look at things and challenges from that spiritual perspective, which is delusional. It's not in alignment with the highest reality, with actual reality and how reality is constructed. That's hidden from us and it's not encouraged. And I think that there is a deliberate agenda, there's a deliberate reason that certain people, beings, entities benefit from us being cut off from that. But that's a task that each of us can take on for ourselves. There's nobody who they can only do what they can do to try to control us as a society, but we all have that individual choice to make that connection. And I think that's the biggest benefit and opportunity that we have is to shift our perspective to acknowledge that soul that we are, and then to strengthen our connection from a spiritual standpoint, and everything flows from there.
Absolutely. So there's so many benefits, like you said. It's multi-layered, and most one of the most important ones of all is just again, it's that soul connection, understanding that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. Because to your point, I think this world is designed to be a distraction and to keep us from really connecting with ourselves, keeping us stressed, keeping us away from that flow state, right? Which allows us to again really illuminate the divine that's working through us. And I'm thinking about this movie which I reference quite often on the podcast, which is literally called Soul by Disney.
I love that
I
movie.
love that movie. That movie is a great example of what it means to be in your flow state. And they showed a couple of characters when they're in their flow state, whether it's playing their piano or
Playing
whatever they're doing,
basketball.
playing basketball, and it's like you see them entering different dimensions. They're still on Earth, but they're like their soul or their being is experiencing different dimensions that they might not even be consciously aware of because they're in that flow state, which is extremely powerful. And I really want to talk about as well, and I know that we're coming to time a little bit. So there are a few things. Maybe I have to have you back on the
I
show,
love
but
that.
to talk about some of the other things I wanted to touch on really quickly. But speaking of flow state and entering different dimensions, you talk about this idea of a multi-dimensional state. And I think we use the word multi-dimension shifting so often. And I think a lot of people don't really have a good grasp of what that means. What does it mean to be in a multi-dimensional state?
That's a great question. And I think that there are a lot of ways we can look at it because even if we never feel like we've had any sort of whatever we want to call it, a multidimensional, quantum, any state where we're like, oh, I'm somewhere unfamiliar. This is like the Matrix. I can see the Matrix or whatever. That can be it. But for a lot of people, that's not how it's happening. But if we're just having a a 3D experience and we're just in this physical reality, one way to equate it is the dimensions that we have within our own experience of we have a physical experience. We also have an emotional experience. We also have a mind, the way that our thoughts play into it. So there are three different ways that we can approach reality and experience reality. You can have like health, you can look at a health problem that you have and you can attack it from multi dimensional ways, right? You could do a sound therapy, use sound, which is one, you can think of that like a dimension. You can have a surgery that's going to be a very physical thing. You can pray and you're accessing a different dimension. You could do homeopathy, which is very frequency based, but you're actually ingesting something. So that would be a different. So it's all these different approaches, but they all overlap and converge and they can all affect each other and work together. But typically, when we're talking about spiritual multidimensionality, it's that we have this 3D world that we're all familiar with, where we have physicality, we've got our five senses, we move through this place through time, and we're all very familiar with that. But there are other aspects that are real that our consciousness is connected to, but it's not physical. And so they operate with different physics. So, for example, we should all be familiar with the concept of heaven. And I know when I was little, I thought when you die, you go up to the clouds and then you live in the sky and you're invisible. And I really thought that my ancestors and everybody who I ever heard of who had died was going up and living in the clouds and that God was there too. And what I understand more and more as I've been going on my spiritual journey is that we do continue on when we don't have a physical body anymore. But that dimension that we go to as a spirit, first of all, it's not the same for everybody. Different people, depending on your orientation, what your soul orientation, there are many different options for where people go that's quote unquote home when they leave or where they want to go. Maybe they don't want to go straight home to where they have their origin. They want to do something else. But it's actually sharing the same space that we're in. So it's not somewhere else. It is here. It can be here, but it is invisible and it's at a different vibrational frequency than we operate in the physical. So this is why you can have psychic mediums and they can say, "Oh, your grandma's here." And they can accurately describe your grandma and they can give you messages that there is no way that they would know, but she knows what's going on in your life right now and she knows what you need to hear right now. And it's not because part of them is going up into the clouds or that your grandma's coming down from the clouds. It's that her energy is vibrating at a frequency where she can be right here, but we can't see her with the way that our physical senses are developed. And so we can have many different dimensions. Just the afterlife is one example, but we have off planet intelligence, non human intelligence that are living in other star systems, that might be living on ships that are in our atmosphere. Some of those are able to be seen by human eyes, some of them aren't. But those are other vibrational frequencies. And that's one of the things that if you look at life outside of Earth from a scientific perspective with Newtonian physics, that where if you remember back in April 2024, we had a big eclipse in North America. And I was coming back from spring break. That totality, I was on the line of totality. My house was on the line of totality. And so we were coming back from spring break, and I was sitting next to I think he was an astrophysicist professor, retired astrophysicist professor, who was now living in China or Indonesia. He had been in one and was now in the other, but I can't remember the details now. But he had flown from there. He was an American, but he was flying to Indianapolis because he wanted to see this total solar eclipse. He wanted to be in the line of totality. He had flown into Houston because you were also on the path of totality, but they were predicted to have rain. So he was jumping on a flight and he was sitting next to me. And so, of course, I'm like, we get to talking because he's so excited. He just can't believe this opportunity. He can't believe that I live on the line of totality. Do I understand what a big deal it was? I was like, oh my God, this has been on my radar for a while. But of course, I wanted to talk about ETs. He's a physicist, he's like an astrophysicist. And I was like, what do you think about life on other planets? And he said, we don't have any substantiated proof of that. We have very sophisticated technology. If other life was out there, we'd be seeing it. And I was like, yeah, but our instrumentation is looking for things at certain frequencies that we pick up with our senses that they may not be on those frequencies. So if you're looking at, for example, the Pleiades system, are they physical beings? Are they on the same spectrum of light that we can see with that instrumentation? Or are they resonating above that and they're not registering with our equipment? And he didn't have an answer for that. And it was interesting because, again, like he was retired, he's studied this his whole life. And it was like, I couldn't believe he'd never thought about this, but it was like I was presenting new information. And he was like, well, that's something to think about. But we don't have evidence for that. It's speculation. He kept coming back to it's speculative. And it's, yeah, of course it is. But if we acknowledge that we can only perceive with our physical senses and with this equipment a certain spectrum of energy, then there's a whole field of stuff that we're not picking up with it. So it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. And especially when people are having personal encounters, that there's a lot to be said for people who are having telepathic encounters or even seeing things with their own eyes and things are matching up. And so, anyway, those can be other dimensional. I think that vibration and frequency, vibrational frequency, they're interchangeable in that way. But that plays into dimensionality as well, where there are different dimensions that are based on bands of frequency. And when you're not in that band of frequency, you're not perceiving it the same way that you would if you were resonating at that
I
frequency.
Yeah, I agree. And I've heard someone describe us before as being cosmically blind. And I think that to your point, when scientists, physicists try to get evidence for other intelligent beings, again, with what you said, it's like at what frequency are you trying to permeate? Because that is also important to think about because they could be resonating on a frequency that is not, that our machines aren't, technology isn't picking up and we can't pick up from our, with our physical eyes. But on top of that, there's also evidence that probably obviously often isn't considered scientific with stories about people having ET contact that I think should be looked into and integrated into scientific study, but that's a different conversation for a different day. I really loved what you said in the book. And I think I don't want to butcher how you described this, but you made a distinction between or talked about the relationship between energy, vibration, and frequency. And from my memory, what I heard, and I hope I didn't get this wrong, but I think it's important to talk about briefly, I mean, for the listeners to hear it because I thought it was brilliant. You said that everything is energy and energy particles vibrate, and essentially the frequency comes into place by measuring the vibration.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I got that. I'm so happy. But I remember when you said that, I think I understood immediately because obviously I'm constantly talking about energy, vibration, and frequency. But when your mind just doesn't put it all together, that was like the best explanation that I've ever heard.
Oh,
So
good.
I just wanted to
Thank
like
you.
call that out, especially when we talk about being multidimensional beings and being aware of the multidimensionality of this world as well and how we're able to tap into different things and how we're able to do that. I thought that was brilliant. Okay. Before we close out the show, I definitely want to ask you why you wrote your book, Your Authentic Awakening, A Guide to Everyday Spiritual Living. I know that you mentioned that it is for the curious minds, but I want to hear more from you as to why you thought it was important to write this book and why write it around this time.
Thank you for the kind compliment about the vibration and frequency. Yeah, so the origin story for the book is actually an interesting experience as well because have you heard of the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so there are 13 crystal skulls on the planet, and they are mysterious. They're of mysterious origin. They seem to be connected, but they're found in different places. And there's all kinds of fascinating research that's been done that they can't explain a lot about them. And one of those crystal skulls happens to be near enough to me, a couple hours away. And my spiritual teacher at the time, I had a spiritual mentor, and he was living in nearby. And he was there was a TV, like a producer who wanted to interview him because of something that he had done on a previous project. And he said, "Do you, will you?" Because he had interviewed him before, and the sound quality was awful, so he couldn't use it. And that was years ago. It was like a couple of years before. And so he was wanting to restart this project, and he said he was like, I want to get in touch with Michael and see if I can re-record this somehow." And then he found out, like, oh, he's in Indiana. Wait, I'm in Indiana. I'm doing this other project for the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull. So they got in touch, and it was going to be like, come up and let me interview you so I can do it for this other project. And so Michael was like, do you want to go on a road trip? Do you want to see the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull? And I'm like, what's the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull? What are crystal skulls? I had no idea. And so we go up there, and he does the interview, and we're able to meet the guardian of the crystal skull. And he's, hey, do you guys want to quote unquote take a ride with the crystal skull? Just meaning, do you want to sit with it and have a session with it? And they were going to do a little bit of filming for their project. It was a win-win. Let's get some B-roll footage of other people connecting with the skull. And when I connected with the skull, I immediately and only saw an open book. And it was so clear. And it had been playing in my mind, like, oh, I could see myself writing a book where I just try to give some inspiration and some clarity to how I see spirituality and try to keep it grounded because it can be really, it's like when you step into the spiritual world, there's a lot of lingo, there's a lot of ways that people describe things that can be confusing. And so I wanted part of that just to ground, like, okay, here's what some of that means that might be confusing, or you might hear it used in different contexts, or you may just hear it thrown around and not know. What is vibration? What is frequency? Are they the same? Are they different? But that type of thing, what are we talking about? Some people call things the soul. What's the soul versus the spirit versus higher self versus a monad or source or whatever? Is it all the same thing? Are there differentiations? So part of it is laying that groundwork also so that I could continue to use lingo throughout the book without being without having confusion as to what it is that I'm talking about. But I also have had some mystical experiences that I feel expand our understanding of what reality is and helps our consciousness to expand through the sharing of those types of experiences, but they also have practical applications. And so I wanted to be able to share those as well, and try to also lighten the topic, because it can be a very dense when we go into spiritual work. It can feel very serious, it can feel very dense. And so I also wanted to keep some personality in there and keep things kind of light. And so that was my impetus, really, was to try to keep things fun, light, but also increase knowledge, but more than anything, expand the consciousness so that people's perception of reality or understanding of reality could get bigger through engaging with the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were questions I had relating to your mystical experiences and consciousness in general, but obviously we didn't get time to talk about that. It's interesting because whenever I go into these conversations, I always tell myself that I have a guide on what I want to talk about, but I'm always open to wherever the conversation leads. And more questions just kept coming up about meditation. So that was what was supposed to come through today. So hopefully you can come back on the show and we can get more into the mystical and consciousness part of the conversation. But it's been such a great conversation with you, Kara, and I really appreciate your time. I have to ask you, have you shifted in perspective on anything recently? Because the show's called Shifting Dimensions, and I feel like we're constantly shifting. So would love to hear if you've had any shifts lately.
Yeah, this year, what comes up for me really quickly in 2025, it has been the shadow. That has been huge for me. In my journey through whether it was lineages that I've engaged with, different spiritual teachings that have resonated with me, it's been for a long time very just focus on the light, focus on what you want. Don't keep going and picking the wounds and focusing on what you don't want. That's the law of attraction thing. The more you focus on what you don't want, the more you're actually drawing it to you, and all of this stuff. So that there is some wisdom in there. So I don't want to just say that's worthless info, but it is incomplete. And that's what I have found this year. And because there is this shadow aspect, and I know we talked a little bit about this earlier, but there is this part of us that is hidden, and it can be driving our behavior, but we don't recognize that it's driving our behavior. And it can be sabotaging us, but it's really trying to protect us. It can be suppressing memories that we maybe didn't think that we could handle. But as we go through our spiritual development, our spiritual evolution, part of the opportunity that we have is the reclamation of the fullness of who we are. And that means accepting all of who we are. And I can share how this showed up for me, but and I will, but really the invitation, the learning, the lesson for me is changing my relationship to the shadow, how I see the shadow, the role of the shadow, an appreciation for what is under the surface and the benefit that we have from unearthing that and gaining more access to ourselves. So, the way that this showed up for me, like I said, I was never really drawn to shadow work. If there were workshops on the shadow or whatever, it wouldn't catch my attention. So this was not something that I deliberately sought out. But you've alluded to the mystical experiences that I have. And one night at the beginning of this year, I was having this beautiful mystical experience before I fell asleep. And I was in this realm of light, and there were geometries, and I felt great. And it was this beautiful, high vibrational experience. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this memory came back from when I was a teenager, And a couple of friends of mine were hosting or were planning a surprise party for another friend of ours. And I didn't get invited to it, which was just very weird. And it was really hurtful at the time, but I just kept moving forward. I told myself that it didn't bother me. And we're not talking like huge trauma, but you're 14 years old, you want to fit in, you want to be accepted. At that stage of life, like that, it is a hurtful thing to go through. And especially that's a tender, vulnerable age, I think. But there were really interesting circumstances with it because I was also really embarrassed. I was like, what's wrong with me? Why everybody else got invited? Why am I not invited? And so you feel isolated, you feel targeted, you feel embarrassed and ashamed. But this person was still my friend. So I asked my mom to take me to the mall to get her a present. And that was specifically why we were going to the mall. And while we were there, it was the night of her party, and she and her mom were there. And we ran into them, and the moms knew each other because we'd been in sports together for a long time. But I'd known her since elementary school. And so I'm talking to my friend, my mom's talking to her mom. And while we're all talking, her mom is whispering to my mom, "You guys need to get going because we're on our way out and we're going to beat you back. You're not going to get there in time." And my mom is like playing along, like she has some idea what this woman's talking about. And when they leave, my mom says, "Why didn't you tell me it's her birthday party?" And I said, "Because I wasn't invited." And I burst into tears. And that was the last time I talked about it. And I buried it so deeply. It was so hurtful at the time. But I was like, nope, I'm fine. I didn't take it out on anybody. I just buried it. I told myself I was okay. I told myself that I didn't care. And I didn't look back. And so I'm having this beautiful 33 years later. I'm having this beautiful mystical experience where I'm flying high and everything is great. And then, bam, remember that time when they had this party and you got left out, and then you were so embarrassed, and then even your mom knew about it, and then you started crying, and that was even more embarrassing, and you were in the mall and all of this. And I was like, wait a minute, put that back. Where did that come from? No, you are not invited to this. This was a great party. And luckily, I caught myself. As soon as it came in, my knee jerk reaction was, nope, go back to where you came from. That's not safe. And so then I was like, wait a minute, what's happening here? Let me look at this. And then it took several days of little by little, but it happened pretty fast, but it was also not all at once. It took a little while to process. It took a little while to access the fullness of the memory because I was like, what is this? Is this real? Did this happen? How have I not thought about this in this long? I worked on it in meditation in terms of letting myself feel the truth of how I felt because I never let myself feel it. I just told myself how to feel, and I didn't let myself feel that hurt and that vulnerability, that shame, that embarrassment, all of those things that I was like, it's okay that I felt that. It's okay to feel that. You're safe. Let's be truthful about how that feels. Let's really feel it. And then it was also in meditation working with the one person in particular who I feel spearheaded the decision to leave me out, who was a friend of mine. And how I felt, but also offering forgiveness. Again, this is just in meditation. This is not somebody that's in my life now, but feeling this, like really going into my heart space, feeling that heart connection with her and giving forgiveness. I forgive, even if maybe she's forgotten all about it too, but just for my own, I forgive, I release. And then also recognizing that I must have played a part in some way for this. So, whatever hurt I may have caused her, that then she used that opportunity to do something to me. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. So, whatever hurt I have caused, please forgive me. And just letting that space between our hearts heal and come into I see things as geometry. So, like coming into a geometric, harmonious, balanced, whole, complete, integrated unit. And again, this wasn't a one and done. This was something, honestly, that I had to come back to. And there was also a part of recognizing that because I had denied this part of myself and I had buried it so deeply that energetically I had locked away part of myself and part of my own energy. So when we, like you were saying not very long ago, we're all energy. Everything about us is energy. Even the physical matter of the body is energy. It is vibrating. And when we're denying parts of ourselves, we are not accessing energy that is ours. It belongs to us. So that was working on that reclamation of even this wounded part of me, even this part of me that has these things that I don't necessarily want to feel all the time. But you're a part of me too. So come in here and and then allowing like the alchemization that happens, because when we get into that acceptance, that hurt part of us doesn't stay that way. It transforms. There is a transmutation that happens through that acceptance. We don't continue, that part doesn't continue to identify as something to be rejected, as something to be feared, as something unworthy, because it has been imbued with love and acceptance and even appreciation for what it's been through, because I firmly believe that there's a part of that experience made me more compassionate. Throughout my life, I have been thanked by people who have thanked me for recognizing that they were feeling excluded and bringing them in. There was a woman when I lived in Italy and I was near moving and I didn't even recognize her. And she went out of her way. We had a mutual friend and we were just settling up the bill after we were talking. I didn't recognize her. And she said, I just want to thank you because a couple of years ago, we were meeting as a group and I was feeling so insecure and I was almost left. And you started talking to me and brought me in. And I was so I was so grateful that she shared that with me, and then also embarrassed that I didn't remember it. That I think that the drive for that, part of the drive for that is I've been there and I don't want people to feel the way that I felt. So that was a gift that it helped me to be more compassionate. So to tie all of this together might seem like that was happening through my imagination, because again, I was just working on it in meditation, but everything is connected. So going back to that multidimensionality, really interestingly, I happened to get during this time, I think it was about 2 to 3 days into the work that I was doing on this in the meditation. And I'm not very active on Facebook. And so I don't get my notifications on my lock screen, if that makes sense. So if somebody sends me a message on Facebook, the only way I see it is if I'm already on my phone and then it flashes up very briefly and says, so and so sent you a message. I don't keep in touch with this person. The only way that they would have to connect with me is through Facebook. And they sent me a generic message, but they sent me a message and I was on my phone able to see it, because what normally happens if somebody connects with me on Facebook, it takes me a long time to see it. I'll go in every once in a while and then I'm like, oh my God, this was 2 months ago and I missed it. And that happens most of the time. If anybody connects with me that way, it takes me a while. And so the fact that I saw it instantly and that she reached out after all these years, and again, it was just a generic thing. It wasn't like, oh, I was thinking about you and remember this time. It wasn't related in that way, but it was enough for me to be like, whoa, it seemed like a signal from the universe to say, okay, this healing that you're working through, here is a verification in the physical world that this is permeating into the physical, even though it may feel like it's happening through the imagination, or because the imagination can play a big role in the work that we do in meditation, the healing work that we do. But I was stunned because we've been connected on Facebook for probably 15 years or something back when I was more active on it. And I don't hear from her. And then to hear from her in that space of time was really profound. And I don't hear from people very often on Facebook. So it's not my mode of communication. So,
What a powerful story, and also very relatable as well. And her reaching out to you definitely was not a coincidence whatsoever. So I'm so glad that you were able to recognize that shadow aspect of you or that memory and work through it and integrate it and alchemize it. And like you said before, a lot of times we have the shadow side of us that if we don't address it, it can still have effects on us in our unconscious or subconscious mind that is affecting how we move through life and we might not even realize it. So that was a very powerful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, work with you, or purchase your book?
yes, thank you so much. My website is karagoodwin.com. I spell Kara with a K. And my all my podcast episodes are on soulelevationpodcast.com or on YouTube. The channel is Soul Elevation Podcast. And then my book is on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all those regular places. And my social media that I am active on is Instagram. So that is my handle is Kara underscore Goodwin underscore meditation.
Awesome. I'm going to leave those links in the show notes. Thank you again, Kara, for stopping by Shifting Dimensions.
Thank you so much. It's been a beautiful conversation.